Well, hello, good morning, and welcome to our latest Bristol Life Business Surgery. I hope this finds you as well as it might do as we all address the challenges of wherever we are now. It changes so frequently, doesn't it? My name is Greg Ingham, and welcome to this Bristol Life Business Surgery. We'll be talking about new workplace thinking, strategy, culture, rationale, implementation, the interaction of that with working from home, what it means for teams, what it means for our business philosophies and so on, and the very front-end iteration of that, what our places of work will look like in the future. We're trying to help all businesses and employees in these peculiar times with practical advice and valuable insights because we can all do with help, hence these Bristol Life Business Surgeries. Doubt is uncomfortable, but certainty feels some kind of absurd in these times. Yet one certainty that we all have to is that we all have to find new ways of redeveloping our businesses and our pipelines, all trying to recover something of what was being lost commercially in the great pause or since. And while it may feel uncomfortable to be promoting our businesses when our teams are short working or worse, the truth is that all of us are rightly working really hard to develop what we have and to promote our offerings across the piece. A business without marketing and without a plan to develop really will find it tougher in 2021. We really can't just hunker down and hope. That's not a strategy. And so that's part of our backdrop today to this business surgery, why companies should consider investing in their workplaces as part of their strategy and business planning, a direct iteration of their own thinking. How these times have changed the way many people think of our workplaces irrevocably, and what companies should be doing and thinking about as a result. These business surgeries more generally should help you as senior managers and owners of businesses, practical insights from experts in their field, and for free, which is always good. Please talk to us if your business has an offering, has a deep professional service area, which would be relevant to our audiences. And of course, our webinars are always available, as this will be shortly, on our Bristol Life YouTube channel. Ahead of starting, some parish notices. Look out for our next Bristol Life Business Club on Nighttime Economy later in the month. The nominations for the Bristol Property Awards close this Wednesday. So if you're active anywhere in the property sector, in that value chain of finance to law to developers to builders, architects, suppliers, agents, residential, commercial, letting agents and so on, deal makers, please come forward. These awards are headline sponsored by Smith and Williamson, and our thanks to them and indeed to all our sponsors. Likewise, thanks to all who joined us for the quite remarkable Bristol Life Awards a couple of weeks back, and you can find it on YouTube as a very Bristol celebration of this extraordinary city. There's full coverage of the awards in the very next issue of Bristol Life out on October 9th. And while I'm giving thanks, please also, I would like to give thanks to all who've supported us at Bristol Life in our return to publishing, whether that's editorially or whether it's commercially. It's been incredibly supportive and heartwarming. You know, we all need buoying up, and we have been very buoyed up by the response of Bristol to our return. We're absolutely delighted to be back, celebrating the joys of this city once more, issue in, issue out. Good luck to us all going forwards. So today we'll be hearing from Interaction about the workplace, the new workplace and new workplace thinking. We'll be covering many areas, starting with vesting the whole thing in business strategy. How does your workplace support and reflect and extend your strategy? How will your teams work in this new era, which is already starting but will be more apparent next year? Workplace culture, how will yours develop in these times? How does your workplace reflect that culture? And also, what about the duality between increasing amount of working from home, but the need for workplaces to be hubs as cultural epicentres and places of collaboration? Offices also as destinations, exactly that working from home point. If you can work from home, you can work adequately, in fact, optimally in many cases, why would you want to go to the office? What then do employers have to do to help make their places of work destinations where people really want to go? And a slight standback point, remake, remodel. We're all having to revisit why we do what we do and how we do it. And so here to consider the key benefits of changing our physical working environments. I'll be interviewing or discussing with two speakers on your behalf today from Interaction, and we'll bring in questions during it. Please ask your own using the little Q&A button at the bottom, and they can be anonymous if you fancy, but I mean, otherwise, please just say your name and ideally your company as well. Our speakers today, absolutely delighted to welcome Dieter Wood and Deborah. Let's Deborah Wilder, if they could both step forward. I'll give you a little introduction, if I may. So Dieter is the MD of Interaction, an expert in understanding the impact of design and space on culture and organizations. He's responsible ultimately for interpreting and then understanding clients' visions and translating them into active workplaces. 20 years experience across a wide variety of commercial and leisure industries, from project management through to consultancy and business development. And Deborah, Head of Workplace Research and Strategy, she's got, I'll come on to this lovely tone in a moment, a pracademic approach, so come to that. Look forward to that, I love my neologisms. She leads Interaction's consultancy proposition focused on people-centric workplaces, very analytical approach. Dare I say, it sort of starts with a theoretical approach and then places it into action to understand right at the heart of organizations' needs and ambitions. An expert in quantum qual field work, data-driven recommendations, particularly to impact employee retention and so on. And her approach is defined as a pracademic. So it's that combination of the academic and many years, having done a BSc in psychology and occupational psychology, an MSc in health psychology, variety of positions in academia, then a number of different positions in public and private sector organizations. So hence pracademic, both practical but also very academic in theory in approach. So let's start with Interaction, if we may, for either or both of you. How has it been in these times? What's trading been like?
Well, thank you, Greg. Good morning. Thanks for having us on your business surgery. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's been interesting times, as it's been for most businesses, without a doubt. Certainly.
Oh, that's such a euphemism, Dieter. I'm not going to let you get away with that. Interesting times. Tell us a little bit more. How has trading been for you?
Okay, so let's talk about trading for us. I mean, we were very, very busy going into the pandemic, and as we went through March, we did have to close our sites for about 5 weeks in line with understanding what our obligations were to society and understanding how we manage risk with the guys on our sites, etc. We closed our sites for about 5 weeks, and then we reopened them all in May, and we've been very, very busy through all of that in terms of work delivered on site and with our consultancy proposition. And like many businesses, we've been impressed by how well all of our employees have coped with working from home, and we've adapted and embraced new technology and all the rest of it. Of course, I think the economy, as you know, we're all following a pipeline, and there certainly are now some challenges as the most recent statements by Boris are suggesting that this working from home is going to continue on for longer, and therefore some businesses are thinking more deeply and are pausing some of the projects that we typically would do with them. So that is giving us some challenges.
But let's come back to that longer term point shortly. I just want to still keep this to Interaction, if I may. So for example, we're all trying to figure this out. Roughly how many people have you got in your team, and how many of those are regularly actually in the office, perhaps right now or this week?
Okay, so the Interaction team right now is, I think, 44 directly employed members of our team, and so we have, of course, members of our team who are permanently employed on site. So the rest of the guys are office based, if you call them. We have had our office open since government guidelines changed back in August. And since then, we've had a steady trickle of people in. I think we're bucking trends in terms of the numbers of people in, and there's been various reasons for that. I think we employ quite a young team, and I think many of the younger members of many organisations are much keener to be in. It's very much part of their social life, etc., and they probably don't have a good provision of working from home as some more senior members of the team. And also I think we have very good technology in our office, so lots of people that used that to come in. So whilst it was still appropriate for people to come in the office, we had quite a lot of people in. Typically, our maximum capacity, I think, here under COVID safe is about 20. And we have a booking system, and we've been sitting at around 15 people in our office most of the time.
And just
last week.
Again, this isn't absolutely directly about your business offering, it's more about yours as a business. Did the announcement on whenever it was Tuesday night give you pause for thought? Because that appeared to be a complete volte-face, that where the government had previously said, get to work, you know, all our lives depend on it, apparently. It then became only work if you have to. So have you sort of pulled back on prompting your people to come in, or have you, or just simply said, well, it's just the same as it was before, essentially?
Yes, interestingly, we had just evolved into a situation where we were thinking about our own work culture and how we protect that and make it sustainable. And we had changed our working from home policy about a week or so ago to sort of get people to commit to spending a certain amount of time in the office, so we could make sure our team was still really well bonded. Of course, Boris's statement on Tuesday changed that, and we have changed our policy off the back of that and said, again, if you can work from home, you should. But if there is a reason why you would like to come to the office, then we're happy to have you here. But you know, we're looking for those reasons to be around technology, internet, a decent home environment, or you know, for many people, their health and well-being is suffering by them being.
So dare I say, a genuine reason rather than a preference to be with. So we're all sort of navigating that course, aren't we, about trying to do what apparently is right by the government to the extent it's consistent, but also what we need to do for our businesses. So that was an interesting insight. Let's come on to your business offering and how you work. You know, as ever in all of these, either or both of you on any of it. So let's start with strategy. So your approach is very grounded in theory and thinking about trying to interpret businesses. Talk us through how you would approach that with almost like on a pro forma base with a client. How would you, as an outside company, attempt to get under the skin of someone's strategy such that you can then iterate that in a physical environment?
This one. Well, very good question. And we are, over the last few months, we have been working with more clients than ever on this. It's just, you know, it's very topical and really important to think about. I'm thinking about one large Bristol client. We are doing a full workplace strategy and design development project with them. And it is very in-depth. It's been fascinating. So we are doing, we've been doing face-to-face interviews with their executive board, getting to know them, getting to know. So it's not these days just about desks and carpets. It's really thinking about the culture and how it will work with a dispersed set of employees. They are dealing with issues with people working from home from sort of 200 miles away, and how they need to keep people connected. So we are thinking about how they're working now and about how that will be translated into their new office. And we're in rapidly changing times. We're asking them not to make knee-jerk reactions. We're asking them to make use of this time to think carefully about what they want to do in the future. And they are really having to come to terms with what they imagine their workplace to look like a year ago when they started on this journey to now what they imagine it to look like, and it will be very different. It will have we had seen massive increases in density in offices, which we are now seeing the reverse of. We will see bigger desks, we will see more space between desks. We will see a greater emphasis on well-being. We will see a lot more emphasis on technology, so using technology to gather data, to monitor who's there and who's not there, and also to accommodate video conferencing behaviours, which are very, very different from before.
Yeah, I just want to pick up a couple of points there. One is it's been true across a whole load of areas that this great pause has also been the great accelerator. And I wanted to your point about companies, what they're now thinking as opposed to perhaps when they began that journey a little while back. that it has prompted change in business thinking because we're all in new times. Is that actually true, or is that sort of just a a voguish moment that we all
Yeah,
think?
I mean, I think actually, interestingly, whilst that there's been challenges in our industry, in our sector, without doubt, we're in this great opportunity where we've been beating the drum for years and years and years and years about the importance of workplace to have a successful business community and have a shared purpose, etc. And what this has done is it's really raised the question. So suddenly we removed the workplace from all of the businesses, and pretty much that's been across Europe and in the world this has happened. And suddenly people are really thinking, well, what is the point of the office? So for us, that's created an amazing opportunity, because this is the thing that we've been talking about for years and years and years. And we've become the focus of a lot of people's questions. Never been, well, if it could be any dinner parties, we would have never been so popular, but you can't go to any, can you?
But I mean, I just boomerang that back to you from an existential point. What is the point of the office? Unless there's a very good answer to that, what's the point of your business?
Absolutely, that's a very good question. Well, I mean, it's absolutely broad, isn't it? Because without a doubt, people have gone away and worked from home, and they have been productive and they have been successful. We've seen it with our own team. I'm sure you've seen it with your team as well, Greg. But without doubt, there's only so much life in that. When everybody went to work from home, we had a common goal, or common enemy, if you like, that we had to work for. Everybody was in the same boat. There was a sense of, we need to survive here. We're all going to work together. People were concerned about their jobs. They were working very, very hard. And everybody kind of pulled together. So then the question is, well, hold on, if we're being so productive, why should we be in the office? But of course, over time, the value that you had at the start from the bonding and the shared purpose of your teams by them all knowing each other, there's attrition against that. And eventually, they won't be as bonded. So rather than being in a place where you have a shared vision, you become siloed around, and actually the communication in businesses changes really, really significantly. The communication becomes very centralized. It's coming through Zoom calls, it's coming up to the center, going back out again, and that's not the way that modern businesses work, is it? I mean, they're not as hierarchical as they used to be.
Much more fluid. Just at this point, if I could ask Rebecca Beer to come forward from AVEC UK, who's got a question precisely about that culture when it comes to new members of staff. So if she'd come forward now, by the wonders of this great technology. Rebecca, good morning.
Good morning. Oh, you're
so I managed to give you only about sort of 10 seconds notice there. So
that's fine. I was trying to unmute. Is that
my apologies. Would you like perhaps briefly say your company, what you do, but then ask your question, please.
So I run a product and design development company based in Dorset. We deal with global retailers. So this has been a very interesting time. Like literally everything that you just said about working from home, everyone being there going, yay, we can do it. And then going, oh, well, actually productivity or effective communication. So I 100% agree. So my question was, we are in a period of hiring and some of our team are Bath and Bristol based. And so how do you integrate your team and your new team members when there is this remote working ethos and now the restrictions in place? Like, how do you integrate them? Because we're a very office-based company, and so the world's changed. It's spun on its head, crazy times. So how do you do it? What do you recommend?
We're all waiting on your golden words here. We at Media Clash face that exact issue.
Let me take this one. Well, I think if you'd have asked me that question 6 months ago, Rebecca, then I think it would have been a bit more challenging now. I think it is very difficult when you're hiring new people, and this is where the culture can get diluted, because people can do these video calls and operate very successfully when they already have a foundation of a friendship or business working relationship already there. And it is quite difficult to build those relationships from scratch. So I think that you do need to intersperse it with some face-to-face interaction. And even so, you say you're in Dorset, but you've got some staff in Bath and Bristol. So I mean, I would recommend meeting halfway sometimes. So for example, we have a client for us who's spread across the UK. We started a project with them a couple of months ago, and we have been having quite lengthy meetings online. Last week, it was quite good timing in a way, but we met in London, and we had quite a long meeting, but the atmosphere and the vibe and the creativity in that face-to-face meeting was probably 100 times better than it had been on those Zoom calls. And now going forward, we might not see each other for another 3 months, but we already have that sort of more established relationship. So I would say wherever possible, and even if it's just sort of once a month, but perhaps once a week or once a fortnight, go and meet halfway, meet in a coffee shop somewhere. We have the ability to do that now, whereas we didn't in lockdown before. But do try and intersperse the sort of, you know, the majority of video calls with some face-to-face interaction.
Yeah, I think one of the errors that people have made, and you know, actually, I would say us as well, because what we tried to do is we were suddenly thrown online and we tried to recreate the things that really worked for our businesses in a workplace online. And so, you know, us as a business, every 2 weeks we have this thing called interaction time. We all get together and we kind of talk about what's going on and have chats, have a bit of lunch, etc. And we try to recreate that online. But of course, when you're all together, actually physically together, there's all these separate conversations going on, and people feel there's like little one-to-ones going on. And then we go on a Zoom call, it's kind of one person has to talk at a time, otherwise it's complete chaos. And you know, that's great for extroverts, but it kind of then just ends up having this kind of this conversation going on between 3 or 4 people, and you can't create the conversations between individuals or small groups online because everybody can hear them. So what Deb was talking about is that need to recreate those side conversations that go on at company meetings. And I think a lot of companies that are probably in that, you know, small to medium size are falling into that trap, and it's very, very difficult to do.
To your point earlier, in a sense, Teams and Zoom meetings actually become more hierarchical than business ordinarily is. There is one person speaking to.
Yes.
We can't profess to be exemplars at all, but we attempt to use much more of the sort of interview questioning technique to bring people forward. So a number of people are saying their pieces about their areas, but it's nowhere near as good as the side meetings, as you say. Rebecca, thank you for your question, and all the very best luck navigating these strange times. Thank you. Let's come back to clients. And are you experiencing desire from clients for, in simplistic terms, perhaps smaller, cooler offices? They won't need the physical space, but they do want to have a better destination and are actually spending more on a smaller space.
Cool. Well, I mean, without doubt, we've always kind of said this quite strongly, that your office has to be a destination. It has to be somewhere that people want to go. And, you know, we talk about in different times with it being a key factor in attracting and retaining staff, but more than ever, it has to be a destination. There's a shift where employees feel that they can choose whether they come to the office or not. And I can't see how we're going to change that particularly. So what you've got to do is create an opportunity for them to be like, right, I've got a day, I'm not in meetings, whatever it is, I want to be in the office. And that's going to, for a lot of people, going to be a really big shift, because there's no point coming into an office and sitting in the corner and working away, doing what you could quite happily do at home. There has to be a reason to go there, and has to be a sense of being welcome and part of a team. So, you know, there are key things that we're talking to our clients about the types of spaces and the type of vibe that you've got to achieve in those places. So in terms of spaces, we already touched upon needing, you want some bigger desks, you don't want to feel like you're trapped in, you've got to make sure you've got some video booths, you've got to make sure the place is really clean and you can sense that it's safe. But equally, the role of kind of our facilities teams and our HR teams is changing. You know, there's an element of hosting here that needs to happen. People need to come into that space and feel immediately welcome, feel like they're part of your work gang. And, you know, it's a bit like, we kind of laugh, it's a bit like the Cheers bar, which, you know, some of us are old enough to remember, where everybody knows your name. But that's what it wants to be. You know, if you want to be able to come in that office and be like, I can get a great coffee, I can see the people I work with, I can have some informal and relaxed time. It's got to be a destination.
Yeah. And to Rebecca's point earlier, that's even more critical when it comes to new members. It's a bit, it's a slightly stretched metaphor, but it's almost like being a migrant in a new country. We all have to work harder to assimilate and to welcome and to be good and so on, because it's bloody difficult to get the rhythm of companies, the rhythm of the senior management, colleagues, whatever. If you can't see the body language, you're not sort of sharing that downtime with them. These times are changing.
Sorry, I just wanted to add that through talking with a lot of clients and interviewing people and talking with sort of various people, I'm also coming across this, it goes beyond Zoom fatigue. It's this new type of sort of lacking in confidence that quite a lot of people are experiencing. And they might be, we've been doing quite a lot of pictures and presentations, and it's very difficult when you're doing it to a blank screen, or you're looking at yourself in the corner, and quite a lot of people are experiencing this lack of confidence, which when they then go into a room with people, they suddenly discover again.
Yeah. Let's come on to the sort of the national mood music, which we talked about earlier. That it's all cannons to one side, perhaps it's all cannons to the other side. But if it is, at least in the near term, only go to work if you absolutely have to, which is pretty much what the message boils down to. Does that hinder your business development, or is that just, or doesn't the immediate short term really matter to you as a business?
Fine. So I think, well, definitely it's created a lot of interest in what we do, and a lot of people asking us questions. So from our consultancy business, absolutely, it's been very, very good. And I think people need to be able to bounce off their own thoughts and think about strategy. And one of the dangers, I think, about working from home and coming back is that the people who hold the decision making, the leaders of businesses and the senior execs, etc., they're the ones that probably have the nicest working at home environment.
Indeed.
They probably are the ones with the worst commutes because they live further out, etc. They're probably the ones with the young kids, and they're probably the ones who don't really want to go to work to meet friends and new girlfriends and boyfriends and all those sort of things. So there's a resistance from them to go. So fortunately, it's really important to get the other side of the view, because if you don't ask the right questions of your employees, they're all going to say, well, we just want to work from home. I don't actually think they do, but actually it is more convenient for them in some ways. And
two or three things. I mean, I'm sure some of that is uncomfortably true. I'm thinking just personally that of course is the case. On the whole, the more senior, the better the domestic environment, and the slightly older, different life stage and so on. But I think in virtually all cases when there's been surveys, you get a relatively small number who say they want to be in the office all the time. Slightly larger numbers say I want to work from home all the time. But the consensus by some measure is a blend of the two. So how, to your question, to your point about making sure you ask the right question, how do you get under the skin of what people really wish beyond asking such bold questions as we have of asking?
So really quickly, I think we obviously have been through this process. We believe in this process, and we've been through it ourselves. And one of the things that I found most revealing, and Deborah did this questionnaire, was that our guys understand what we do, and they understand the value of workplace. So we asked them the question, is it really good for you working from home? And most of them said, yeah, that really works well. And then we said, do you think it's good for the business for everybody to be working from home? And most of them said no. And it's because they do understand that there is a value for the business in terms of it being robust and sustainable in terms of its culture long term, that you've got to get those people together. So I think the problem is at the moment, not enough people are thinking about that, because they think, oh no, we're okay, but they're not thinking about the slow attrition that is happening. And there's been case studies, people like Google did this, etc., where they went, right, everybody work from home, particular department, and then eventually they got to the point where they're like, no, we need to be back in an office, and they found a massive struggle to get that culture back together. So, and it's a difficult thing to bring back. It's harder than trying to keep it going. So there's a danger there.
You mentioned, go on, Deborah. Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to say the questions that are being asked. So in all my times, in all my sort of decades of research, I've never come across such a frenzied time of question asking and answering. But one of the main questions businesses are asking is, do you think you're as productive working from home, or more or less, or whatever? Now, most people, because they don't like the commute, but also because they have these expectations of, will I lose my job if I, people are worried about losing their jobs at the moment. People are going to say, yes, I am productive working from home. So that self-presentation is, can perhaps be misleading in the way they answer. Also, people have been in this rallying kind of feel where they're almost in a honeymoon period as well of working from home. But it's not just, it's not up to the employees where they work. It is up to the business to a certain degree, whilst we're still trying to accommodate and, help people enjoy their lives, not just their working lives.
We've explored that very point in business surgeries from a legal perspective of both the rights of an employer to insist, but the rights of an employee to say no. And on the whole, there is a fault line there. And it ultimately comes down to a managerial approach, which is more persuasive as opposed to the diktat. If you have to insist, you've probably lost the argument. But that increasingly, wherever we are on the scale, I think most businesses will be looking to move up in terms of occupancy and hours in the office, albeit there's then the backdrop of the most recent pronouncement. Let's come to one point here about the immediate trends. If your business as a commercial offering perhaps is less, you may be more prominent, of course, and it feels very zeitgeisty as a business as a consequence. But you're also trying to anticipate longer term trends. If you could, perhaps we've talked quite a bit about working from home, and I want to come back to one aspect in a moment. Talk more about trends inside the office, perhaps of office design and layout beyond the larger desks, better tech, etc. you've mentioned so far.
Yeah, well, I think in terms of people's portfolio strategy, so large businesses that have multiple offices, there's lots of talk of this hub and spoke model, which I think a lot of the businesses which are HQ'd in London are very much talking about. And I think you have a very different situation in London than you probably do everywhere else outside it. So without doubt, I think Bristol and Bath will do well out of the changes to strategy going forward. And we will see more regional offices so that people can kind of reduce the risk of being able to shut down whole workplaces by having them in different parts of the country. And it's just inevitably going to go forward where people with disaster recovery and business strength, they're going to think about pandemics going forward. I don't think just because, coronavirus, hopefully there'll be a vaccine and it will go, but clearly it's a risk we now need to all think about going forward. I think there will be additionally much more of an interest in, well, if we don't need to be in an office all the time, is that just about being in there all the time from a day to day, but could it be week to week? So certainly we're starting to see a little bit of a trend around, could people have offices where they're in them 1 week a month, or they're in them Monday and Tuesday, and they share that space with other businesses. And this is where I think we clearly are already in a position where the property sector was really needing to kind of pivot. And the insistence on making businesses have long-term leases with large liabilities in terms of dilapidations and all the rest of it was closing in on the landlords, let's face it. And it's great, and it's accelerated that. And what we're going to see is much more of an emphasis on flexible office providers, where you'll be able to have much shorter leases, much more adapted to your space. And maybe, rather than people doing the fit outs themselves, they'll be looking towards the landlords to provide that high quality space. So that's certainly an area which I think lots of businesses, I'm sure, are looking at this, because it's like, do we want to have our own space on a long-term lease where we're responsible for everything, or do we want to have a much shorter liability, probably at higher cost, but less liability going forward? And I think that's definitely a model which is accelerating through COVID.
So have you heard of the TWT model?
I'm afraid I haven't. You're going to tell me all about it, so please.
I do, yes. So this is based on the space as a service model, where some businesses may not have their own office, but they may rent that space out on a perhaps Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then some other people, and perhaps businesses who are bootstrapping or who are smaller, may use that office on a Monday and a Friday, or either. They may also, they may be working all over the country if this is a smaller business, and then they may bring their employees together for, say, a week. They may rent out that space, which might also have residential space, and that might be an immersive experience. So they have a much higher quality experience, but perhaps for 1 week per month.
Yeah.
It is fascinating. It's almost as though, from what you're both saying, that all variables are more variable going forwards.
Yes.
How you work, the length of lease, the shape of office, the way teams work, multiple iterations you've just been through, the TWT model, which are now being enshrined in all our thinking, I'm sure. It just means that, perhaps slightly counterintuitively, well, maybe it isn't, there's a greater need for interpretation. Precisely because these times are more complicated. This isn't a dolly up to interaction itself solely, but I think it's for any consultancy type of business, your value or your insights are actually more valuable now than hitherto, because no one knows. We're all trying to figure it. Is that how you see? Do you see yourself as a consultancy essentially?
Yeah, definitely. We are a research, design and build business. So, when people see us around town, we're often doing building, but there's a lot of thought that goes into that process. And the reality is you've got to be really, really considered in that thought, because when you're talking about culture, these things build over time and they erode over time. And, and if you're committing to something for 5 years or under lease and you make a strategy which is wrong, it could be very difficult to put it back. Culture is the thing that keeps your business going. Without a doubt, it's the people and the interactions between them that make most businesses work effectively. And if you make some long-term decisions based on not considering all the evidence or not considering what's particularly unique about your situation, then it could be something which is eroding so slowly you don't really catch it until it's too far. And I think that's where people lean on businesses like ours for advice.
Do you buy that argument that culture trumps strategy?
For lunch, isn't it?
Or eat it for lunch. You're probably not. I'm misquoted.
I don't. I think that a lot of businesses come to us looking for a workplace that will build their culture, and that definitely doesn't work. It can go hand in hand. So I would say the same would work for strategy as well. I think that it's chicken and egg.
Yeah. But most businesses will know this, that the culture is something which you have to set. And if you lose control and that the leaders are not setting the culture is being set by the team, what you need them is to align with your culture, not to be the ones who are driving it. So I think the culture has to be the strength, but there has to be strategy to define it.
Yeah, it's almost the hub and the spoke itself. It's the spine and the limbs, perhaps, and you could argue that the spine is the strategy and the limbs are the culture, or you can have your own metaphor of choice. Wanted to give you a more antithetical question, which is this: all this talk of culture and offices being the physical embodiment of business strategy, in a world where survival is the metric of success for many, isn't all of that just poppycock? No offence.
Well, it's interesting you to say that, because I think survival that's okay in short term, but really the businesses that are going to do really well are the ones who are focused on thriving. Like you've got to be focused on that all the time. I mean, lots of businesses that we've spoken to, they've had some tough times and they've had to make some tough decisions, but they've been impressed by how quickly they've made those decisions and how quickly they've had people embracing technology and new ways of working and everything like that. So I think thriving is absolutely something which is at the forefront of those who will be successful right now, as it was back in April, in May, whatever. It has to be, doesn't it? You have to be thinking, how can I turn this situation to my advantage? And I think that just has to be the basis of what the decisions that people are making.
And when we're thinking about workplace, you could think about the survival bit, which might be the knee-jerk reactions and the dealing with things as they are now, and then the thriving bit could be the strategy bit, taking this time to pause and think what the future may look like, how we want to carve out the future, and that will make all the difference. But as you say, not just taking that time to pause, but also accelerating lots of changes which probably should have happened 5 years ago or so if people were so cautious.
And I touched on this point in the intro that that companies that are simply just hunkering down and trying to survive and get through, that's very short term. That's right for many businesses, but that's not the plan. They're going to have a tougher time in 2021 if they're not in some way changing what they do, whether it's the physical iteration of their office, their marketing, their business development, or whatever. We can't just simply hope. Hope is not a strategy.
And I sensed that change a little bit last week when I think there was this realization that I think lots of the people we were talking to were all saying they're going to come back to the office in September. That was what we were expecting to happen. We'd have somehow dealt with the pandemic over summer, and all the kids would go back to school and we'd all come back to the office. So clearly we haven't seen that happen. And I think realistically, if you just think it's going to happen in January, as much as we'd all like to believe that, I think probably that's a little bit of false hope as well, because what we've seen in terms of the current increase in COVID at the moment, things like students going back to accommodation, things like that, when you've got mass movements of people and parties going on, well, we're going to go into Christmas and there will again be mass movements of people and parties going on. So, we have to think about how we're going to work around this long term. And I think the reality of just closing your office and letting everybody work from home, subject to government guidelines, for just months and months and months and months and months and months going forward, I don't think is a strategy that will work for most people.
No, agreed. We've had a couple of questions from Annie Kelly of Ad Maxim. It's a take on what we were talking about earlier, but a slightly different perspective. She's talking about the challenge for bosses and businesses. How can you preserve and boost employee happiness and innovation when teams are rarely now all in the office together? What would you advise?
Oh, that is a tough one. I mean, I think in the early days, we were all doing, we were doing Zoom bar and we were doing quizzes. I think that people have really got fed up with all of that. Particularly because in those times a few months ago, the screen was their method of work. It was their method of socializing. So I think that we need to now, because it's more longer term, we need to think in a bit more detail. This is the time for, everybody needs to be treated as an individual. We need to be thinking about individual circumstances, the job role that they're doing, where they sit within the business, who their line manager is, what their circumstances are working from home, what their personal circumstances are. So for some people who live by themselves, it's been a really, really tough time. So I think now is the time for the line manager to really come into their own. They're not just managing workload, but they're also managing and trying to support mental health as well. We put in place mental health first aiders, both on our sites and within our office. We're supporters of a charity called Mates in Mind, which was originally a construction charity, but it's now wider to the workplace. And they're doing online courses. I would recommend that any business that doesn't have those in place gets them trained up and gets them to be looking out for those sites and signs, which it's really difficult to do when you can't just look across the office and see somebody with their head in their hands or sort of looking worried or needing support.
Yeah. Subsequent to this, would you mind just dropping a link to that to the charity you mentioned, and we'll put that back out about the comms around this. But a related point, you mentioned
innovation. I didn't want to not answer the question. So I think certainly many of your audience, Greg, they are in the creative industries, and often the jobs of leaders in those businesses are the kind of creative connectors, aren't they? They're the ones that kind of wander around the office and go, oh, what you're working on, and what you want to pull that person in, and they kind of just make it happen. And they're kind of like herding the whole thing around and sparking the ideas and putting in a bit of magic here and there. That is really, really difficult to do online. Because you can't create that same impromptu discussions in quite the same way. And certainly things like Teams, where you can pull people into calls, works really, really well, but it's not as good as having the right kind of technology to kind of collaborate online. And certainly one of the places where I think we will see massive improvements is collaboration software being used online, but it's not as good as getting face to face, is it?
No, it's not. And I mean, I think everyone's Yeah, everyone's starting to use Teams also as just the drop-in conversations, as though, you know, you pop to someone's desk and have a quick chat. Sometimes those 40 to 60-second team chats are actually, you know, rather than being formal meetings, they're better. Deborah, you mentioned earlier about the questionnaire which you'd curated for Interaction itself. I'm going to bounce you publicly. Would you be willing to share that publicly? Maybe sort of amend it or whatever, so it's more generic. Because we're all looking for help, and many companies provide the sort of white papers and think pieces and so on. This could be very valuable to companies, and it could be a little bit of, dare I say, a bit of branding and development for you as well. So get the name.
Of course, and we've actually run, since the beginning of April, we've run a number of surveys, and will continue to do, both on behalf of bigger clients, but then also on behalf of Interaction to the wider business community. So we've got plenty of things to share, and I'd be happy to share.
Please do, that's good. We've got a few questions that I want to get through. We are beginning to run short of time, about 50 minutes. From Liam Potter, I'll be interested to see which of the changes to workplace culture are likely to be permanent, and which are likely to return back to normal. We'll revert when we can. If you just be brief on that point, what do you think might be enduringly different? And thank you, Liam, for the question.
Well, without doubt, working from home as part of your working week is definitely here to stay. I can't see how that will change. I think now people have realised the benefits, not only to their outside of work, but there is clearly benefits inside of people's work lives. That is here to stay. And it's about how we adapt our way around that. Without doubt, video conferencing, you know, we've been great users of Zoom for over 2 years now, but clearly that has shifted. The amount of businesses who just are on Teams has exponentially grown, and the benefits of that will continue. People aren't going to not use that going forward. So those are the really big shifts. I think the things that won't change, I mean, if you wind back 2 years, there was a really big push to have, you know, lots of businesses were like, we really need to have a great space. We need to have a great environment. We need to have a fantastic workplace to attract the best talent to collaborate with us. You know, that can't have gone completely in 6 months. It just can't have been. And when, at the moment, we probably don't have that war on talent in quite the same way. Certainly in some industries, in tech, there's very much, there's a real struggle for talent there. But in other businesses, that recruitment may have slowed down. But as soon as we come out of this and the economy starts to grow again, there will be a real battle for the right talent again, and you'll have to use everything in your armory to make sure you've got the best people working for you. And definitely workplace will be one of those. And the sense, not only the environment itself, but the kind of culture that it creates will be a tool which you'll use for.
Yeah. Okay. On to a question from Christine Scar. What are you doing? And this is essentially it's a design question at the heart of this. What are you doing to support companies to create socially distanced environments which are not sterile and uninviting? And that may be a relatively short-term perspective. We don't know short-term. We don't know how long this is going to go: 3, 6, 9 months, a year, whatever. But how do you do that? You've got culture and permeable conversations on the one hand, and you've got sheets and signs and don't go here on the other. How does that work?
That's a really good question, and that is one that so Dieter has said that over the last few months we've been very busy, particularly on consultancy and strategy, and that's not just working with clients on their longer term strategy, but on their interim strategy as well. We have it has been the time of the facilities manager, but in many cases it's been too much for facilities managers, because it's not just about making the space practical and safe, it's about making it attractive as well. So many people, in fact, it would be difficult to say that nobody has been through some tiny amount of trauma over the last 6 months. I think most people have. And most people, or many people, are coming back to the office cautiously. And the last thing they want to do is come into an office which has got sort of yellow and black signs, danger, and do not use.
Hazchem, yeah.
It's not welcoming, and they need to feel safe. They don't need to feel that they're in danger. So we have been working on, for a number of clients, working on interim space planning. And that has involved not just blocking out desks, but taking some desks out, redesigning, but at minimum cost. And sometimes often it would be with branded signage, which is, very much in the business's brand and identity, not just sort of yellow or red or yellow and black stripes. So it looks nice as well. And thinking about, so we have veered away from putting in these temporary cubicles. We're really concerned about the amount of plastic that is going to end up somewhere after this period. It's possible to space people out by rearranging some furniture and introducing one-way systems or whatever. So yeah, it's been a big part of our work over the last few months and probably will continue to be.
Yeah, thank you to Christine for those questions. She also had another question about introducing new people, which I think we've largely covered, but thank you anyway. I wonder, as a complete stand-back point, if you come away from the very immediate circumstances which we've essentially all been talking about this morning, do you think, in a sense, we're seeing almost the triumph of the dot-coms, that what was deemed to be, self-servingly, achingly cool with football tables and beanbags and whatever of the millennium times, actually is becoming more commonplace, not literally, but generally more commonplace, that offices can be fun and enjoyable places to work in. Is that part of your thinking? You've seen that narrative arc?
Yeah, I would definitely, we love fun offices, but my word of caution is they have to reflect the culture of the businesses and the way in which the people in there work. If we go and take a Google slide and stick it in I don't know, some stuffy businesses offices,
be careful.
We have to ask the question. And I know I've had clients in the past that, we've got to have a slide, we've got to have a ping pong table, we've got to have a bar. And I would say to the CEO or the MD of that business, would you go to the bar? Would you play ping pong? Or would you go down the slide? They go, definitely not. And I'm like, why are you doing it? So it has to reflect the mood and reinforce the culture of that business. You can definitely shift it, but it's got to be considered. There is the danger that you're, the Pinterest design office, where you just go onto Pinterest, find all these cool things from Silicon Valley and go, yeah, we'll have that kind of jumble of all of that stuff. And it just doesn't work. It just looks like this random stuff that people have put in the office. So the rise of the considered office, absolutely. And I think that is where you just need to really boil down to what is the tone of voice of your business and how does that reflect in the office environment.
Go on, you go.
The dot-coms have grown up, believe it or not, and actually their focus has been a lot more in the last few years on health and well-being, and on calm spaces and comfortable spaces and quiet spaces and collaborative spaces. I think if you look at, if you want to talk about Google, you look at their office in King's Cross, which was launched last year, I think. It's very soft and welcoming and comfortable. There's not a slide or a beanbag in sight. So it's for those workplaces are for grown-ups, not for children anymore.
Not for kidults, I think was the
kidults, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, what you're talking about is a combination of both organic, that it needs to be there and brought out, but also authentic. And as you were talking, Dieter, about stuff being sort of brought in and pasted on almost to a culture, it's almost back to what country pubs attempted to be a few years back. They thought, with a few horse brasses, we can be authentic, as though, that's when a horse was fed and watered. And it's not, it's pasted on culture, whereas what you're talking about is far more profound than that. I want to come to this point about, again, the dichotomy between working from home in whichever iteration. It might be semi-permanently, it might be short-term, it is, 100%, or it might be a few days a week and so on. But in broad terms, the cooler and more attractive the office is, the greater the disparity from working from home. I just wonder if there's a role or a responsibility for interactions specifically, or bosses or businesses generally, about the workplace environment at home.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And I think so. One of the things that's really important at the start is working from home voluntary or not? Because if you say to people you must work at home, then you become far more responsible, I think, for their home environment. So that can be around the right desk and the right chair and the right screen, but equally you start becoming responsible for making sure they've got the right heating and they're warm enough, etc., and they've got broadband. and there are costs associated with all of those things. So first of all, I think it's something that should be voluntary. Lots of people don't want to work at home. Again, this is this thing where if you speak just to business leaders all the time, actually they quite like it because they enjoy an environment where they're probably getting disturbed less and they can get on with some work and they feel more productive. Whether or not that overall is more productive or not is another conversation. But you do have a responsibility to make sure that people working from home have a good environment. How far you want to go with that really is culturally up to those businesses. If you want to start providing chairs and desks and things like that, it's a big conversation.
That I think you can do more, so that you can do a lot less at somebody's home than you can do in the workplace. So in the workplace, we go much broader. So we're not just thinking about the desk and the chair, but we're also thinking about the views to the outside, about whether they can make some healthy food or whether they can, how much they move around. So we have a lot more control over people's well-being and productivity at work. If you're thinking about how they work at home, beyond their chair and their desk, you really then have to think in the virtual domain about virtual leadership and what you do online and the communication tools that you have. So we have a lot less leeway really in what people do in their homes.
I'd like to come to business work. We are coming close to the end of this, and it's about how interaction works with clients. I know the answer will be that everything is bespoke and everything all depends and so on. But broadly speaking, could you just give a quick timeline if, I don't know, a company of say 50 to 100 employees came to you and said, we need to reinvent our office space and so on, between that first consultation and final iteration, roughly speaking, what sort of timescale might that be?
That's a good question. I think it depends whether they are staying in their existing space or relocating. So
let's say they're staying.
They're staying. Probably about 3 months. And I'll talk through that process because it could be longer. It just depends on the consultancy point. There's going to be an element of understanding those businesses, but also revealing to them what is happening sort of best in industry practice within their sector and other sectors, and helping them realise what is possible. Equally looking bespoke, unfortunately, Greg, about their particular office. Like every building is different, and particularly when you look at social distancing and one-way systems and how you might create different spaces, it is very particular. So you've got to design that. But actually, a lot of the changes are actually quite small in terms of what can be achieved. It's about, Deborah mentioned earlier, about getting signage right, getting it in the right tone of voice for your business, creating some slightly bigger spaces, maybe changing some furniture, changing some technology. I mean, one of the drivers of interaction here is we've got this fantastic 85-inch touchscreen that we use for collaborating all the time. And that screen kind of, brings people in here because it's something you just can't do online. So, and then in breakout spaces, having really good space where people can connect. So these changes can actually be quite small, but can have a really significant effect. But it's just getting it right, because you will realistically, when everybody starts to come back in, people will really judge businesses on that first experience. If they come in and then they can't get a desk, the power doesn't work, they can't now find a screen, the chair isn't very comfortable, I mean, you've just lost them, haven't you? They're just like, well, stay at home.
You're starting from a backwards point. We've got a quick question. I'll ask you for a quick answer on this, again from Annie Kelly of Ad Maxim. Why do you think that in the UK only 40% of employees have returned to their offices versus around 75% in France? And what can we learn from other countries? Quick aperçu, please.
Well, we're doing everything differently in different countries. So in France, for instance, they have to wear masks in the office, not when they're sitting at the desk, but a bit like how we're operating in cafes and restaurants now. We have a slightly lower appetite for following the rules in the UK. I think it's very difficult to make those comparisons. We also have a higher density population in the UK as well. So if you could choose a country which has the same population, the same density, the same attitudes towards politicians, then we can make those comparisons. But otherwise, I don't think we can.
Well, there you go. I'm going to leave you with just one question to you each. What do you most enjoy doing at work?
Or, well, I like to be the creative connector. So I like to kind of go around and just, I like to call it knowledge sharing, but the staff would probably call it opinion sharing. But hopefully it's what keeps it all going forward.
And Deborah?
I like to look to the future. I like to make change happen. But this has been a particularly exciting time for me because people are looking to us to predict the future, but not just to predict it, but to make it happen as well, to form the future. So it's an incredibly exciting time.
So it plays exactly to your strength as a pracademic, and that futurology, I guess, is what one way or another all of us are trying to interpret these times. Thank you very much to Interaction today, sponsoring this session, and to Dieter, and of course to Deborah. Thank you. Thank you for your time and your questions. We've had a number we've not been able to take today, but we will, we'll attempt to cover them as soon as we can. Please look out for our next Bristol Life Business Club on October 26th, which is sponsored by Bevan Britain. Please remember anyone in the property sector, such as Interaction, and many of your clients, I'm sure, do remember those Bristol Property Awards nominations are closing on Wednesday this week. Join us for the next real-life issue of Bristol Life out on Friday, October the 9th. And our next Bristol Life Business Surgeries will include other sessions, legal issues, commercial property, digital strategies, recruitment, employee motivation. If your company has a professional service in any of these areas of business that can help others, please do get in touch because we all need help navigating in these times. This has been a Media Clash production, and this has been our latest Bristol Life Business Surgery. Thank you. Bristol together. Thank you.
Thank you.